You are now entering the Cue the Muses podcast. Please reserve submission of any joy meter statistics until after the program.
Welcome to Cue the Muses podcast form.
Part three. The return of the bandwidth. Well, specifically the return of Dick's bandwidth. Hey, dude, excellent intro. That's the first time I've seen that. How'd you make that? How'd you make like with the lady voice and all that stuff?
Yeah, the voice part of it is super cool. I did a video on my YouTube channel about 2 years ago on a free application that you can use. I recommend this for anyone that's doing video editing. It's called Soundly. And so it's soundly.com. You can go there. You can download the app for free. Now, I'm not sure if this new feature is available in the free version. They have a paid version as well. It's like $15 a month at the time that I did it. But I did a review. I had no connection to it whatsoever. And then the guy liked the review so much, he gave me 3 years for free. The creator of the software contacted me and thanked me for it. He's like, can I put this video on my site? I was like, yeah, go for it. And he's like, I'd like to repay you. Can I give you 3 years of free Soundly? I was like, yeah, that's great. Thank you very much.
That's an endorsement, man. You're endorsed by Soundly.
That's right. So now it's like, it's a paid endorsement. So, but anyway, I have nothing past that with it. And in fact, this will be my last year for free. So maybe I'll send them this video. No. But anyway, they have a new feature and it's really, really cool. It's just voice, and you can literally type out, it's AI, so you can type out anything you want, and then there's a myriad of voices, like a lot of voices, and then you can also change what it sounds like it's coming through. So if you want it to sound like it's going through a PA system or in a bathroom, in a closet, outside, distant traffic, behind a wall. So like if you're doing a scene in a movie and you need it to sound like neighbors are being loud, you could do all this, just put whatever sound in there and then muffle it with that, and then just export. You just drag the file out and drop it into your timeline and Premiere, and literally it's in your project all of a sudden, and it made a file for you in your project folder automatically. It's kind of an insanely good program, but that allowed me to put the little voiceover in there.
That's cool. I mean, I think today I watched twice the 6 Days to Air episode, the documentary on South Park, how Trey and Dave, or
I've
Trey
never
and
seen
Matt.
it.
Oh, dude, it's fantastic. They have a scene where they're doing the voiceovers in the studio, and those two guys, the two funniest people on the planet, and the one guy, like when he does Kenny's voice, he goes, and then right into character on the next voice, like Butters or whoever it is. It was badass.
That's awesome.
But watching those two guys is inspiring because of what we're trying to do. Because Matt Stone and Trey Parker, just
Pinnacle.
two guys, they're still out. Everybody hates them. They're still outside the system. Plus, they just signed a $9 million contract, I think, with Paramount for the next 3 or 4 seasons of South Park.
That's amazing. And the thing is, like nowadays with tattoos, with cartoons, not tattoos. Look out, tattoo artists! AI is coming for your jobs. But the AI ability with the cartoons is going to be insane. It is very, very. Like it's becoming more and more accessible. You put in a little bit of time, and then you can actually create a cartoon relatively way easier than you used to be able to.
Oh, watch that documentary, because they the first episodes of South Park was all 6 days of doing just one scene, but they have a team of animators that basically start the moment they get done with the script, and like they stay there 24 hours, 72 hours. If the script goes over schedule, the animators stay there and sleep there.
Yeah,
and once they're done, it's go time. and it's insane how fast they do it.
Yeah. That pace that's involved for broadcast television is insane. It's a completely different animal. That like a movie is fast paced with a deadline approaching, and you can be on a shorter schedule and stuff like that. But just in general, like the pace of TV is the most intense. And
at the end of the episode, the lead producer literally takes the tape and rushes it over to whatever studio in Los Angeles where they upload it to New York, and then it's aired like that day. It's
and
insane.
That's a completely different animal than what like I do for a living with video work, where I'm hired by like a company, or I'm hired by a band or something to make a music video. And then there might be a deadline, but I see it coming. We're working on the one singular project, and there's just a lot more time involved. In fact, I'm at the point now where it's like I've literally turned down a myriad of projects that were just way too fast paced for me to be able to guarantee that I could make the quality that they're expecting if they look at the rest of my videos.
Yeah,
like if you want that, there's no way I can do it that fast. It takes a lot of time. I'm taking like not this podcast, and not even really my personal vlogs and teaching episodes about video, but just in general, for if I'm hired, like I take it through every step that you would expect in a Hollywood pipeline. For everything from the planning and strategy, to the actual location filming and stuff, and the amount of effort we put into the filming, and then the way that I take it through the pipeline and post-production, and the color grading and the sound and the leveling and the mixing and mastering, and then the soundscapes and Foley sounds, and like everything's being applied to that. And so it's extremely time consuming.
Everything. I mean, you do everything from beginning to end. There's no team. There's no handoff to the animator, handoff to the sound engineer, or nothing.
Yeah. Which is like part of that has to do with being in Tallahassee. There's not as many options for that. And then the other part of it is like every time I've tried to incorporate somebody into the pipeline, it's just it's so much data to move around, because when we're filming in like theater quality codecs, these 8K raw, 6K raw. I mean, we're talking about terabytes. Each time we go film, we come back with terabytes of footage, and you can't just send that around on the internet, to pass it back and forth. And then you're there making like smaller proxy versions and trying to get that to client or to your partners. And then when they send an edit back of that, then you're trying to relink everything. Before you know it, it's like you've kind of just spent so much time moving things around and getting on the same page. If there's any, if you're going to do it remotely, that it's like you kind of lost a bunch of time. And then at the end of the day, I do like doing all of those facets of it. And while you're going through the footage that much, that's where you're like absorbing it. That's where you're really starting to learn and think about what you're going to do with what. And then my weird brain will think of wanting to do things with stuff that you'd think that's completely a failed take, and it's like, no, that's the take.
That's the one. Yeah.
That's the one.
You get good enough where you find the joy and the challenge in it, right? The more difficult parts become the fun parts.
Yeah.
Like you don't really get good at anything until you can take your mind over whatever thing you're doing as a whole of multiple pieces and just lay your brain over it like a blanket, Yeah. You have to think of the whole thing simultaneously, individually, everything at once.
You're letting it saturate you as you're going through it. When you're spending that many hours with the material, even the boring, monotonous areas where you're just trying to get it organized and stuff, you're absorbing it. It's like that. You go to bed and that's what you're waking up. You're dreaming about it. You're waking up. That it's just, I don't know, if I just had all the end stuff already consolidated down for me, I don't know that I would have. I simply wouldn't have the same ideas. Now, I don't know if they'd be better. I don't know if they'd be worse, but they would not be the same. And so far, it hadn't been an issue with my clients. I mean, they just like what I turn in, and I like what I come up with. So I don't know. I like being immersed in it that much.
And that's the key to building your name and your reputation on what you do when you do take it to the very end of your creative process. And then the flip side of that, and to bring it back to that documentary I watched, the flip side of that, if you're on a deadline, the deadline will help you go ahead and determine, okay, this is the end. It has to be the end because we're out of time. Because if not, sometimes you can just spend endless amounts of time, and sure, it'll be the Mona Lisa of whatever it is you're working on, but you'll eat up so much time that so many other things can't get.
And you're very tempted to get you end up in a rabbit hole where you're really just sliding things around, and you're trading out apples for oranges at that point. You're not really improving it as much as you're now obsessing over it and meticulously just reorganizing things, and it's not improving the product anymore. In fact, you can start to lose the backbone to what it is that made it special. So that's a gentle balance of figuring out where that input. And I feel, I don't know if it's just a natural intuition, but oftentimes I feel like I always know when I've reached the end of something. That aspect of it hasn't been as much of an issue for me. And if something runs longer, then some people might think it should. The client never thinks that it's running too long. And what I mean by that is like, and when I say the client, I mean that could be a business or a band. And the thing is like, you don't think it's too long because you're that interested in that particular subject or that particular type of music, or, you know, whatever it is, you're interested in that, and that's your demographic. So if you're interested in it and it's that niche, then that's your demographic. Your demographic is going to be that interested in it too. So if your neighbor who doesn't have anything to do with what you do for a living says, I don't know, it's kind of, don't they talk too much or something, like, is that your demographic? That's what you have to ask yourself before asking for an overhaul to something or shortening something.
Yeah.
And
then it depends on who your neighbor is too. Sometimes you're lucky enough to have like-minded neighbors and sometimes not.
Definitely. So, I mean, if a bunch of bands told us that this Cue the Muses thing was, you know, not good, or the music was this or that, like, it would hurt a lot more, but
yeah, but you know, also the thing with bands too, it's 50-50. It's like anybody else. A lot bands are usually full of very opinionated, often self-centered, narcissistic type people, because that's kind of not to say anything bad about people in bands.
Von Chamier. I do everything. My hands are on every part of it.
It is a lot of times, but you still the community of the people that aren't stick with it, and it's there. You find common ground, and I think that what we're trying to do with this thing should be some sort of common ground.
Yes, with
our peers, but
there's enough people involved in the project that like it, that to me is enough to feel confident in it. You know, it's not like a 3-person band that thinks that it's like this music's good, like there's a community for this. It's 10 people from different bands over years with decades of experience performing, you know, and everyone agrees, like, yeah, like we know that we love this, and that's all we kind of need to know. There's going to be somebody else out there that loves it too.
Yeah, I feel like if they don't necessarily care for somebody in the current episode, then, you know, the odds are the next episode is going to be a completely different style vocalist with a completely different energy that maybe they do like. Like, you know, when we started trying to figure out who we were going to enlist to perform in this thing, the obvious answer was the first two guys in our current single, David Rowe, the vocalist for my group, and Cody Williford, the vocalist for your group. You know, you would start close to home.
And then Kurt was an obvious, because our relationship really started to bud during the filming of the Fighting Gravity video for Defy the Tyrant. Because I did that with them first, and you came out, and your wife Amber is the star in that, and
she's the protagonist. Kurt. Well, let's back up a minute. So Kurt, if anybody listening or watching doesn't know, Kurt Rogers is a vocalist for Defy the Tyrant, like you said. He's also a longtime friend of mine who him and I have been in like 7 or 8 bands together, and we happen to be just about best friends through the last 20 years. And so when Kurt's finally, we had talked about for years, you do a video with Ash, and could never happen. Then the first time it did happen, him and I weren't in the band together. And so, I was like, damn it, man, what the hell? Shit, I missed the video. But he called me and he said, hey, I'd really like for Amber to be in the video. And so I was like, that would be sick. Let me make sure she's okay with it. And then anyway, we did the video for Fighting Gravity. You and I got to talking, and then this thing came together. But so Kurt was obviously a very much of a shoe-in, for this project, because he was so close. And
before we leave that, let me just touch on one thing. I've been a fan of Kurt for some time too, and we kind of had this weird relationship where we'd run into each other. I mean, I remember our bands had shared the stage before in the past, and Kurt's been in other projects that you weren't in, and he was on the stage and stuff. This is how we originally knew each other, but we didn't know each other well. And so me and Kurt would run into each other, and I had loosely I've always told Kurt when I ran into him that I really like how unique his voice is, and that I mean, I don't know if I ever point blank said at some point I'd like to, write a song with you, but I did. I feel like I expressed it on that level. So whenever
he would do the same about you through the years too. It was kind of like you both had the same inclination towards one another as artists. Because in and out of bands with him over the years, he would always say, "Man, we should get up with Ash because what he does with Kill Clouseau is so different. That you guys had that different sound that appealed to him. He's really into that against the grain type of rock." Oh yeah. If you heard that, there's still firework in here, guys.
Oh, really? Your dogs do okay with the fireworks? Because ours freak out.
They do pretty good. Like the little female gets really scared. Kenai doesn't care as long as I'm here. The little dachshund he tries to attack them. So if we're outside, he'll chase them. He'll chase them to the death into the darkness.
Nice. So that was Kurt. So I was happy that we finally got to collaborate, even on the Defy the Tyrant video. I was like, I loved the song that they picked out, and I wanted to do more songs for that album, but they need a budget, I need the time. The budget equals the time. It's just one of those things. And then we started talking, and Fighting Giants was the next project, of which leads to your singer, and I'll throw my 2 cents in about him and my history thinking about him, and my history fantasizing about your singer after you explain your singer.
Who hasn't fantasized?
David Rowe. It's hard not to. It's a big man, big voice, powerful,
big,
a mighty strut.
I have a picture of him. My head's blocking him. There he is, right there. That's Dave.
The flesh.
So he's one of those guys growing up. He was tall, lanky basketball player, kind of preppy, didn't care. Fronted a rock band up there, Tommy Hilfiger button down, forward cap, I am who I am kind of guy, and just natural big talent, big guy, big talent. I can't sit here and say enough nice things about Dave Rowe, man, because he's one of those guys you go out, he's friends with everybody he meets, and everybody's laughing and smiling when they're around him. He's like just that kind of dude. And he also happens to be my other best friend and vocalist for my band Fighting Giants. Hey, Dave. He's in Texas. So everybody say hey to
Dave. Out there in the big T state.
In the big T.
We're in the T City. We're in T City over here. You're in T State.
He's somewhere out there cleaning up a mess.
Oh, yeah.
But and the other half of that song is Cody, your vocalist. Cody Williford.
Well, that was the other thing that was, just to throw 2 cents in about Dave real quick, is that I've always thought his voice was great, and definitely, without doubt. But for some reason, I kept running into Kurt on this personal, like, one-on-one more often. So these conversations would start with him. And with Dave, when you gave me the first rough tracks of Fighting Giants stuff that you've been working on, I was blown away, man. I thought it was so good. I was like, let's absolutely do. And then it also, and I already liked the recording quality that I was hearing from Defy the Tyrant, and I wasn't as familiar with Brett Hesla's recording engineering. And I'd kind of like to save Brett Hesla up as far as the recording engineering part up for another episode, because that's a whole discussion in itself. But I did acknowledge, like, this sounds amazing. And I was like blown away by how, really the whole band, like the whole structure. Guys, that album is out for free listening on Spotify now, and it's absolutely worth listening. I mean, you can go buy it somewhere too, but if you're just wanting to check it out, it's on Spotify now, guys, and it's really, really good. And so anyway, I was really excited, but just keeping it on the subject of just vocals and style. Yes, Dave was awesome. And my singer, Cody Williford from Kill Clouseau, he's like, he's clean. And a lot of my favorite singers are extremely clean. Like, I love big, high, clean notes. I'm just very attracted to it. It's kind of
and Cody has that, man. He has that clean control. It's never, he's never sounding like he's stretching out of place, or that it's out of his zone. It's always his zone. He's owning his zone in every song that I hear him on.
And that
And he's
zone is like home for me musically. I
yeah,
mean, because I just the kind of the
tell.
bands that I listen to the most have that clean tone. I love all kinds of music. I love everybody's voice, but I mean, that's
Just go ahead
why
and
me
say
and
it. Go ahead
Cody.
and say it. It's very APC-ish, very
Yeah,
Coheed-ish.
yeah. It's he's got some Maynard in there, and I love Tool and Maynard. Like, but he's figured out his own way to do it. That it's clearly a Cody Williford. He's got his tone to it, and then the
Yeah.
lyrics. He's a absolute wordsmith. I mean, the way that he puts together, I mean, just listen to the current song. Like those lyrics are just like, I mean, they're so visual. And I really kind of, he started going in that direction and I endorsed it so wholeheartedly because I loved where it was going. And he went full tilt on it. And it's just like it's just like listening to a painting happening in motion. It's I
Yeah,
love
yeah,
it.
yeah.
I love it.
I was gonna say it's like he's wordsmithing while taking you down a path, down a hill, down a path through the woods, and then all of a sudden he chunks you off the cliff at the end
Yeah,
of it.
yeah,
He's just taking you on
absolutely.
that.
And so pairing him, my singer Cody, the clean singer, and then Dave, who can also sing clean without doubt, but overall his tonal quality is that it's got
A lot
that.
more
I mean,
compression. He's a
yes,
lot more big compression from Dave, where
yes,
Cody's like the sleek sports car,
yeah,
going
yeah,
down the track, and then Dave's like the drag strip car.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
He's
And
like the '68 Nova.
totally, man. I love, and so put them together. And then we got
Yeah,
this crazy duet that's in Afraid. The song that they did together is Afraid, and that single is out now as a music video. If you haven't seen it, it's one of the grandest concoctions I've ever created from a video standpoint. But the song itself is like, I mean, I think that song is, it just goes so many places. It's definitely very progressive. It's got a lot of interesting polyrhythmic time
it
signatures
was
to it. It's just very, very interesting song.
it was absolutely the most challenging one, I think, to get completed, to
Yeah.
finish.
Yeah.
And I'm proud of the end product of it. That was
Me too.
you wrote that one and laid basically a very zigzaggy, windy train track that was carved through the
Totally.
mountains. And I had to figure out how to ride a sports bike down it.
Totally. No, totally. It was very complicated. And one backstory element about just musically about that song when I was, because I pretty much brought like the foundation of that song, right? Like, and it was the last song that we came up foundation. And then you came up with every guitar part that's on there that you play. That's a complete invention and a complete,
Yeah.
like it makes it a whole other animal to itself.
And that part of the challenge was trying. I think we lock in together on the exact same riff like once in the song, but that's the
once
that's the challenge of writing with another guitar player is okay.
Yeah.
Well, if I just play what you're playing, that's not writing; that's playing. We can.
It kind of like it's just fun to take advantage of the dynamics of the two guitars and weaving. But I started writing that song when my father was passing away. Like he was in and out of hospital the last 6 months of his life. It was a really, really, really rough time in my life. And I wrote probably 60-ish% of what the riffs were that I brought with that song during that time. And I think that kind of is represented in how weird and chaotic, well, not chaotic. It's just very abstract. And it, like you said, like a crazy train track and stuff. It went a lot of places because I was going through a lot of different stuff during that time. And then I shelved it and then brought it back for this project. And it's the last song that we finished up. And then I came up with the last like 3 minutes of it, and that kind of sealed it. And that was a completely different 3 minutes than I would have come up with direction for the song than I would have come up with had I written it all at one time.
Oh, and it's perfect, right? I mean, it when you write music like that, anytime you write music at all, if you don't find the end of it, well, then it hasn't happened yet. The end isn't.
Yes.
The end literally isn't written, and it's beautiful that we were able to put it together like that with the beginnings of it where they were.
Yeah, it was very exciting. But so those were the three singers we knew out of the gate that we were definitely going to have on the project.
Yeah, there was like when we said, okay, we have a lot of people we know, these three, okay, they're shoo-ins. These are the core three, like, and Kurt knew about the project from day one before we even started shopping vocalists because he's my best friend. And so like,
oh no,
sneak peeks, you know. Uh-oh. Did you lose me for a minute?
Yeah, it froze out for a second.
Am I back?
You are back.
Okay.
You are back.
So we're working on the bandwidth issue. I'm in my home. I have a family of 4, and the children are instructed not to use the Wi-Fi between 10 and 11. But there might be some streaming.
We're testing. We're figuring it out. I unfortunately have to do it off a Wi-Fi signal too. But Kurt knew already.
Yeah, Kurt was my guy on the inside. He already knew. He had a heads up on the songs. And so when we started reaching out to other vocalists, the next vocalist we had in mind was someone who I met through Kurt, which was Nadira. She was current at the time. She was currently the vocalist for Shadow the Earth, who was out playing regularly and actively with Kurt's band. And when I reached out to her, I didn't really know her. It was just a shot in the dark. Say, hey, saw you guys play. She might have saw the Giants play one time. She was very responsive. She said, oh, absolutely. I'd love to write some music. And then I think we kind of talked a little bit about how that song came to be. That song she sings, the first song was actually a song that was written by Kurt and I years back, and it was called Two Bears Fighting, which that line, Two Bears Fighting, made its way into one of Defy the Tyrant's songs. That the chorus or the actual motif of that song made its way into one of their songs. I can't remember which one right now, but anyway, when we sent
the best one,
that was that first the best song, but that was that first song we sent to Nadira, and that was the first song I think where we made a decision on who was going to sing it. Was that song? It was
yes. There were a few things flying around with Nadira. First of all, I discovered her via while working on the Fighting Giants music video, I believe. Actually, it might have been during Defy the Tyrants video. I can't quite remember. It was one of the two, and
they were close together because you did those back to back.
Back to back. We finished.
I think we hired you to move forward.
That's right. Yep. So it was somewhere in that time, and I discovered her through hearing recordings of Shadow the Earth on. I think I first heard them on Facebook, and then I checked them out and found it on Spotify. And I was so floored at how good they sounded, and Nadira's voice was like amazing, that I reached out to them and tried to offer them a discount to make them a music video. So I'll kind of do that sometimes. I will, if I can afford to at the time, because I always make significantly less making music videos for independent artists than I do for companies. But I can't imagine why. I don't know why, but if I can afford to at the time and I can make the time happen, and I was really in music land, which is my favorite thing to do, is make music videos and short skits. Those two things are the absolute cream of the crop for me. Because it's popular.
It's eating a bag of Doritos.
It's me. It's like it's everything behind me is like, I got that to ultimately try to get to do this, make some of my own stuff and do stuff with cool people that are doing crazy art. And so I reached out to Shadow the Earth and I tried to offer a discount. Unfortunately, even with the discount, it wasn't in the cards at the time. And they were also working their recordings. I think the person they were recording with was talking about maybe making them a music video. And I don't think that ever came to fruition. I'm not quite sure, but either way, it didn't work out. So when we later worked on this project, and we were like thinking, let's get a different singer for every song. Mm-hmm. One of the top picks immediately, because I really didn't want it to be all guys either. Like, I wanted a female voice on it. There's not enough female rock. That immediately was like, the point of doing different singers is to have a diversity of sounds, because singers ultimately really can make or break whether you like a band or not. And I think that our goal was to make something that was like completely for music lovers that loved all the different palettes, but it also, there's no doubt they're so diverse that we're going to have some people that definitely like certain songs more than others. And I really wanted that flavor in there. And so, we were on the absolute same page about like, we really wanted to get Nadira on there. And I cannot remember the name of the Shadow of the Earth song, but in discussing who would work on what song, there was one that had a reggae-esque part to it. And we were discussing that part.
To me. I remember your elevator pitch. You sent it to me and you said, Dick, you get now hear me out. Hear me out. Just listen to this song and listen to the middle of it and close your eyes and just imagine that style of vocal over top of the Two Bears, the Two Bears riff. And I was like, oh, dude, sold, done.
Yeah.
There was kind of the possibility of using Kurt on that song because originally it was written, but then it was like, no, that we don't want to do that because we're not trying to redo old songs. We're making new songs.
Yeah.
And when you put Nadira up there in that track, it was like, yeah. And we sent her the track and she wrote just that intro. We still have that video somewhere where she said, okay, here's what I have so far. Set her phone down, recording the ceiling, and you hear us start playing like on a boombox in the room. And then her voice was like just very closer than the music. But all you really kind of heard was her a cappella for the first 3 lines or so of that song. Yeah. And it was just like, oh yeah.
We were blown away, and literally that is all we got to hear all the way up to getting to the studio and having her walk into the vocal booth and hear what she came up with.
Yeah, not playing poker with Nadira, because that
No
car ride up there is about 12 hours for her and David and I. And hey, you want to work on the song a little bit? I'll put it on the car stereo. You want to work on it? She's in the back seat. Just, no, I'm good. Headphones in.
Unreal.
Okay. All right. And then one take, not lying. The only reason we did a second take was just for some fun extra stuff. But the take on My Soul is an Element, for all intent and purpose, is a one take, and not just one take. The first take.
I think somewhere probably 95% of it, maybe 90%, somewhere in there is all still that singular take. Then Brett had her go through a second take because why the hell not? I mean, you already did one take. Let's hear what you can do one more time. And then maybe she punched in on like 3 parts to try a few. The only punch-ins were harmony ideas, I mean, then it was like experimenting with some harmonies, but the main vocal, and to go from sitting cold on the couch to walking into that vocal booth and sounding like you guys hear on the recording. I mean, if you want to talk about a person that's got talent, guys, so she needs to get scooped up. I mean, hopefully we'll help give her some exposure to get scooped, but she deserves to be doing very big things.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think, there's nothing else.
And you and me were not the only ones. Like Brett was looking over at us.
Oh yeah.
It was back to us. And then he was doing this. We were all doing this. And Russ was in there too. And David was there too, right? Wasn't David in the room at that time?
That first trip, it was you, me, David, Russ.
That's right. Yeah. We're all in that room together. And then she'd hit like and we're hearing it for the first time. Again, we didn't know what she had come up with. And so we're like, and she has no idea that we're freaking out in the room. And then she gets done. And then it's this quiet little voice. Was that okay?
Was that good?
Can't even get out here and listen back to this.
Standing ovation. Brett was like, everybody was floored, completely floored.
It was amazing.
And that was one of the moments where we're like, okay. And there was a lot of moments during this process that were like that, but that was one of the first big ones where we were like, oh man, wow. I want everyone I know to hear this. Like everyone needs to hear. Like, holy cow! Because it was seeking out vocalists, but it was like, okay, but don't do you from your band. Like, just do you. Just do whatever. It's whatever this makes you feel. Like, there's no shackle. There's no bounds. I think we asked, like, please don't talk about religion or politics.
That was the only request, and we let them know what the plot was of the movie that had yet to even be filmed a single day of yet, and then we gave them the script section, like before and after, where their song would happen in, at the time, a movie, but now it's a show. And so they could just have some basis of what's going on there. But we didn't say that, like, you need to make it be specifically about this. We just want you to have an idea of what's happening in the show. If that inspires you lyrically, then great. But ultimately, the only goal that we're asking for with this is to try and just make it somewhat like human, because we're fighting an AI. So we want what we're coming up with to be stuff that an AI wouldn't come up with, and come up with it from there. And every singer came up with really completely different ways of approaching that concept. The lyrics on the album are anything but contrived. I mean, if you're actually listening to the words, I think and Brett said the same thing. It's like having a purpose like this made me come up with lyrics. He said something to the sentiment. I'm sorry, Brett, if I'm murdering this, but ultimately that it made him have to come up in a totally new creative way that he just loved, because it was such a fun challenge, and it made him come up with such, an original idea to his lyrical content.
It brought out a different type of creativity from everyone. Now, like with Kurt had the edge on the song that he did, because Kurt knew the working title of the song before we sent it to him. And he actually attached to that one, because like I said, I gave Kurt snippets of each one we were doing, but the one that he ended up singing on was the one that he identified with early and said, I really want to sing on this one. I said, well, I really can't promise that that's going to happen, but I was like, let's just see where it goes. But he attached himself to it. It ended up working out that, yes, he got that song. He knew the working title, and the working title for it was Dark Place, and Dark Place ended up being the name of the song. The name of the song is Dark Place,
and that's not out yet.
No, that's not coming out for a long time. That's going to be episode 4, right?
Yeah, it'll be the final episode of this first 4-part mini-series season that we're doing. Yeah.
And so to get to the next vocalist.
Let's do it in order of who we knew we wanted, and then we'll talk about who made we found him last, which is the next one was Brett.
Yeah.
Brett Hessla.
The next. Yeah. So we wanted Brett definitely to sing on one. And I asked Brett when we started doing this, I said, Brett, will you sing on one of these songs? And if you guys, anyone out there doesn't know Brett, he's like the coolest, nicest dude you'll ever meet. And he like just was like, yeah, oh, absolutely, man, no problem. It's like, whoa, really? You'll sing?
I can't believe it.
Okay. What?
We were talking to each other like, do you think he will do it? Like, I don't know, man, but if he did, that'd be insane, right? Like the singer from Dark New Day.
Yeah, it's so hard for me to like talk to Brett sometimes and not take myself back to that 17-year-old kid standing in Floyd's music store and looking at the singer for Dark New Day in a sold out house, and just crushing it. And, having that, like, then when I talk to him, like, oh, wow, this guy's actually really cool. There's that phrase that's out there. It's like, don't meet your heroes. Well, Brett doesn't fall into that category, because yes, when it comes to Brett, meet your heroes, because he's the coolest dude on the planet. Yeah, and when we were talking about doing this thing, he was like, we wanted him to have first pick, and that's why we couldn't promise any other song to anyone, because he was kind of the most important one, because he's at the helm of mixing and editing and producing. And we were like, whichever one speaks to you. Yeah. And we wanted him to have that pick. And so he kind of didn't know. And Ash, I don't know if I ever told you or not, but Brett actually texted me one day and he was like, which one do you want me to sing on? And I was like, whichever one you want. And he said, I will sing on whichever one you want me to. And I said, we need you to be our closer. We need you on the finale. And the finale is, and then I told him, I don't know if we want to reveal the name of the last. Either.
Yeah, let's
But
wait on it.
Yeah, but I told him, I was like, we need you on, and he said, you got it. And so then it was done.
Yeah,
Then it was like, okay. I was like, oh, I was excited. I was like, oh, Kurt, you get Dark Place. Oh, cool. Let's get the deer for Two Bears because it's gonna be perfect.
Yeah, no, totally. And it was like so exciting that he actually did say yes. And I remember feeling like I was curious if the only thing was I didn't know his taste past, the bands that he'd been in, which are great. Virgo's Malo and Dark New Day are fantastic guys. If you haven't heard these bands, you can check them out on Spotify. They're amazing. These guys were a pretty big deal back in the day. And Dark New Day, I mean, that has Will Hunt in it. That's the drummer for Evanescence. Has the guitar player from Seven Dust in it. I mean, it was Clint. A pretty big act. Clint, yeah.
And Clint, I think that was the first band that I found out anyways, where Clint Lowry and his brother Corey Lowry were in a band together. So I knew Clint was in Seven Dust, famously the guitar player for Seven Dust, like you said. And Corey Lowry was famously, the first time I saw him, he was the bass player for a band called Stereo Mud. Stereo Mud had a song.
Oh yeah, I saw them play like 10 times at Floyd back in the day.
Yeah, and I started following Corey Lowry and Clint Lowry, and then I found out the two brothers were in a band together. Oh my goodness, Will Hunt's in it. Brett Hesse. At first, I was like, "Who is that?" And I was like, "Oh, not only Brett Hesse. I saw him in the Virgos. First, it was Virgos Merlot. Then they changed it to the Virgos. But then, back in the day when Creed, one of the biggest bands that come out of Tallahassee ever, and I think they were taking over the world in like 2001. Yeah, they when they parted with Brian Marshall, Brett went on tour with Creed as the touring bass player. He's in the music video. If you Google Creed Shreds, he's playing bass on top of the Creed Shreds with a Z. I don't want to get in some infringement.
Well, Brett killed absolutely, like what he came up with. That was something where we left, and there's things I don't want to give away about what happens on that song, but I'll just say this, that we left and we didn't really know what he was like. He still didn't finish his parts because he's recording it so he could do more stuff to it. So we kept hearing more stuff come together on it after we got back, and I was like, oh my God, this is sounding insane. This is sounding so good.
That was the one song where all the other songs, the vocalist went lay the whole thing, and then we get the famous thing about Brett Hesse's studio is when you go there, you track, and then you leave with an excellent rough mix.
Yeah, and the rough mixes are amazing that he produces like same day. And it's kind of unreal.
So we got everybody's rough mix for the vocals on the way home, but we didn't get his. He didn't track it while we were there. He did it later, and then we would get a rough version with like a first verse, and then all of the verse and a chorus. And as they came in, and we were downloading and listening, it was just like,
wow. I'm trying to remember how much was on that first rough mix, but I know it just kind of kept getting better and better. He kept sending reiterations, and I'm like, oh my God, man, this is like amazing. So that was awesome. Now, before we left to go record, we had one song left, and ironically, it was the first song that we wrote together that we still hadn't quite. We had tried out a couple of different vocal options, and this was good stuff. It was good, but it just wasn't quite. It wasn't the right chemistry that we were hearing happen on the other songs so far. Where it's like, even though we'd only heard snippets from other people on certain parts, it was like that's definitely the direction for that song. We still felt kind of unsure about this final song. And so the person that ended up making the cut for that one was like, it was kind of like one of the biggest brain farts I think I've ever had in thinking about resourcing. Like, who do I know? Because Russ killed it back in the day. He's been an amazing singer for a long time, and his current band, is Your Captain speaking. And the dude just has like this amazing, it's like the rock voice of the 90s, like, which is my era. Now, I'm not trying to date him, and I'm sure he can sound as modern as he wants, but his 90s sound, it's like everything I loved about the 90s rock wrapped up in a singer. It's like, it's just just so good, I want that sound on the album,
and that's Russ. That's like, man, when I met Russ, I met Russ years back. It was I don't even want to date myself, but it was a long freaking time ago. And he was I think he was the general manager at the Guitar Center in Tallahassee.
Okay.
And at that time, there was a bunch of really good musicians working at Guitar Center.
His bass player, Joe
DeMeritt. Joe DeMeritt from Seeking Suey in Tallahassee was working at Guitar Center too. And Joe
Sinister Nasty was their band.
Yes,
together,
Sinister
right?
Nasty. What happened? I was rehearsing up in Tallahassee when I met Russ. I was there's this famous storage facility in Tallahassee on the northwest side of town, and like all of the bands, not all, but a lot of the big bands in Tallahassee at one time have had a shed in this storage facility on the northwest side of town. And I had a shed up there where me and Curtis were in a band with Shannon Storazician and Eddie Maldonado called Chaos in Man. And we were jamming up there. And as I was up there, I saw walking around there waiting on my guys, I walked by a storage shed and I saw these 3 dudes in this storage shed with like 2x4s and a hacksaw, like this old 1920s Amish guy cutting wood type of thing happening. And it was Joe and Russ and Eddie, the guitar player, and all the 3 guys. I was like, hey, you're the guys who work at Guitar Center. And they were like, yeah, man, we're starting a band, blah, 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 Sinister Nasty, otherwise known as Snasty. I was like, that's the coolest fucking thing. That's the coolest thing I've ever heard.
They were awesome.
I was like, what the fuck are y'all doing with these hacksaws in here? They're like, oh, we're trying to build a band room. I said, well, I'm a carpenter, right?
And you guys are doing a terrible job.
I got like power tools and skill saws. I said, so I was like, dude, let me help you. You guys bring the material and I'll build it. So I built them a drum riser and a vocal booth thing and all that. But we created a friendship, and Russ was the vocalist. And back then, that, like you said, that band, he embodied everything vocally from like all the, like you said, all the greatest bands, from Eddie Vedder to Kurt Cobain to Chris Cornell. The guy just has that tone and range. And I was like, when you brought him in, we sat and we did scratch tracks at my studio. Yes. And I had never worked with Russ. I've been friends with Russ, but I never actually. And it was like, he came in, I was like, wow. He started putting ideas out, and I was like, wow, that sounds so cool. Like, that's so perfect for what it is, exact opposite contrast of what that song was. Cause that song was like, there was kind of like, it could go a way that we didn't really want it to go if we let it, it had a very driving, heavy, and keep in mind, it wasn't anything we weren't wanting when he came in there. Like he came in and found that spot where he said, that's what it is. Holy shit.
That's right. We just had not heard anybody give that. One, we didn't have a sound like that anywhere on the album. And 2, he has really amazing range. So he's able to hit some big belting stuff. It's like, this is like you said, it's a very driving song. It's like, it might be the most driving song on the album as far as just, and Timbo, the drummer, our drummer that we talked about in the last episode, he put a completely different spin on what I thought that song was going to sound like. And that's what made that driving sound to it. And I loved what he came up with. I was like, whoa, this just became it's not the heaviest song per se, but it's like the most like just pedal to the metal, doesn't let off, just keeps chugging on. Like, it's just so. And it had a little bit of that old school metal vibe at parts in it. And so Russ's kind of, and again, I don't mean, dude, Russ, I in no way mean to date your vocals at all, but you are the closest thing that we have on the album to like a classic rock singer. And I love that sound. So like having that on there was just, the idea that we could have that just got me giddy. And when I remember hearing his first like loose ideas that I think he sent something on he had recorded with a phone, or he had gotten up with Kyle Alleygood at Gasoline Alley, and he just kind of did it rough.
No, now I'm losing you.
Oh no, really?
You're back now.
Am I back now? Okay, all right. Yeah, I think he might have gotten up with Kyle Alleygood at Gasoline Alley and didn't even do a real recording whatsoever, but it was just like something where we could hear a little bit of a scratch track, and just hearing those first initial ideas was like, gold. I mean, I was like, that's it. That's like, all that makes sense now. Like there's no question mark to the chemistry of that being a song. Now we've got the other chapter that we needed to like say we've got, like, for rock, we've kind of covered I'm not saying like the gamut has been covered to an extent. Now there's other voices, there's other styles for sure, but we have definitely offered quite a large palette across the spectrum of 5 songs, especially doing, duet in there. It's like, I just couldn't be more happy with how that came out. So he was the final one to get on. And like, we were going to record, I think within 2 weeks of him coming on board. He had the least amount of time. He was the last one to get figured out. Again, I was kicking myself in the ass for not thinking of him before. I don't know. We just had not seen each other in I think a couple of years. So it's like, how sometimes you're just not, I don't know, man. Like I said, it was the most absent-minded resourcing that I've ever done. And so when I thought of it, I contacted you. I was like, dude, what about Russ? And you're like, that could totally be an option. Like for some reason, and we checked with him. He was open to it. He tried out and just did. The rest is history. So, I mean, it'll be more history when his song comes out. It's kind of sucks that music isn't out yet, but when it does come out, he's on there and it's amazing. And guys, we've just hit 51 minutes. We covered all the singers.
We made a
I'll
record.
see you later. Goodbye. It's getting late, man. I gotta hop on some more editing.
We made it through. And ending recording. 3, 2.